here to review a comic book graphic novel by the name of Casa Nostra. This is a graphic novel that has been put out by Udon Entertainment Corporation. This is their first original work. They usually do a lot of franchise work. This is a story, a graphic novel that was brought to my attention by my buddy Spike Valentine. I thought I'd do a review of it. This is written by Chris Saraceni, who's been working in the comic book and film industry for over 15 years. The artist is a very talented artist by the name of Nick who's a freelance graphic artist with 20 years experience in the Canadian animation industry and a comic book creator himself. Nick's dedicated himself to the art of storytelling and has a passion for design. And believe me, when you see some of the pictures and some of the art that I'll show you in this review, you'll see that this is he definitely has some talent and it's worth checking out. The writer here, Chris Saraceni, he's written a lot of other successful comic book stories in the pages of Transformers, Street Fighter, and Dark Minds, as well as he's got his own independent creations such as Bounty, Fate of the Blade, and of course Casa Nostra, which I'm going to review right now. Guys, just the synopsis that is on the back of the book, just to whet your appetite a little bit. If you like gangster movies, if you like the 1920s, the early 1930s, this is a graphic novel you might very well want to check out. It takes place in 1933. Four women are running a comforting safe house for Chicago criminals looking for basically a place to stay, or after they do a crime and they need a place to hide out. These four women run this safe house, and it ends up that one of the men that they put up in this safe house betrays them in a very egregious fashion, and it ends up being a story of revenge. And what makes it all the more intriguing is that this is 1933, which is at the height of Prohibition, at the height of the Prohibition era, the height of the gangster era. For those of you who don't know your history, 1933, it was at the end of 1933 when Prohibition actually ended. So all of 1933, this was right at the height of crime, the height of everything. This is a story that involves gangsters, fisticuffs, violence, love, romance, betrayal. This has it all, and it's all set in Chicago, the city itself, as well as the rural areas surrounding Chicago. Now, before I get into describing the characters and the general storyline in this graphic novel, with the goal of whetting your appetite, I just want to be upfront with you and say that it's not my intention to provide any spoilers. It's my intention in this review to whet your appetite, to encourage you to get it. This is going to be a positive review. It's funny because I always try to be objective in my reviews. And if something bugs me about a graphic novel, I'm going to tell you if something bugs me about it. Whether it's based upon my ignorance or my false assumptions, you're going to get my full-blown first impression honesty about it. And the simple truth of the matter is that I really enjoyed this. I really enjoyed this. The story, it flowed. It flowed very well. It was a beautifully told story. It was beautifully crafted. It was a visual feast. It was beautiful. And there's some minor criticisms I'll have, but I'll get to that. But first, I want to whet your appetite by letting you know who are the players in Casa Nostra. First, I want to introduce you to the four girls that make up this safe house. And the lead girl, her name is Claire. And this safe house that they run for basically the Chicago Mafia, the Chicago criminal network, if you will, it's called the Dollhouse. And it's kind of funny because if you think of gangster talk, and you think of gangster talk, they call women dolls back then, right? So naturally they'd call this the Dollhouse because you got four beautiful women that run it. And of course, the lead protagonist is a woman by the name of Claire. And Claire herself has a background. Claire's father, just to whet your appetite, happened to be a bank robber who went missing when she was quite young, and she's always had this dream in the back of her head that maybe one day her father will end up show up at the safe house, because her father disappeared after a bank heist many years before. Now her father never makes an appearance in the story itself, but that's just a little background about Claire. So it's interesting how her father disappears and she ends up being sort of the lead host to this dollhouse that houses these criminals that need a safe place to stay every now and then to hide from the coppers, so to speak. The other three girls are Rosa, Annabelle, and Sharleen. Annabelle is a beautiful, naive, but very highly moralistic young woman who's beautiful and who's got a very sort of very high moral fiber. And you could picture Annabelle probably being someone who always sees the good in people. That's Annabelle. She's a kind and compassionate soul to all who enter the dollhouse. And then we got Rosa, who's pretty good with guns. Rosa is kind of the opposite of Annabelle. She's kick-ass, she's badass. You don't want to piss off Rosa. She's sort of like I guess you could say she's more of the rough house a little bit. She doesn't take any crap from anybody, and if she's about the closest you're gonna get to one of the tougher girls of the four girls. And then we got Sharleen. Sharleen is sort of the medic. She does a lot of the when there's medical work required. Or she's the doctor of the place, so to speak. She's not a doctor herself. She's got a medical background, and she does a lot of the healing and a lot of the treatment of a lot of the mafiosos or the criminals who end up being housed at the safe house. They get treated by Sharleen. The other characters involved in this story is a man by the name of Charlie, and Charlie's kind of like, he's kind of interested in Claire, but they're always teasing her. Will they or won't they? You could tell that maybe there's something going on between Charlie and Claire. And Charlie's kind of like he's like the cleaner. Whenever something goes wrong in the dollhouse, he helps the dolls, so to speak, clean up the mess. He does what has to be done. There's another character in here called Alvin Tucker. Alvin Tucker is sort of like, he's an up-and-coming gangster. He wants to make a name for himself, but he's relatively unknown. But even though he's relatively unknown, he's pretty damn good at what he does. And he comes in handy when Claire needs, when Claire has certain plans of her own she wants to put into effect. Then we also got Frank Nitti. He became the head of the Chicago Mafia when Al Capone went to jail for income tax evasion. Frank Nitti sort of took over the network. So Frank Nitti is making sure that everything goes right. And we also have a group of dirty cops called the Clovers, and they play a prominent role in the story. And the bad guy in the whole story is this man by the name of Carmine the Butcher Rizzo. The crux of the story really starts to come into place when Carmine is a psycho. He's a crazy guy, and he likes to hurt women. And what ends up happening is Carmine Rizzo is the golden boy. He's Al Capone's golden boy, and even though Al Capone's in jail, he doesn't want anything to happen to his golden boy, because Carmine is Al Capone's enforcer, so he doesn't want anything to happen to his golden boy while he's in prison. And so Frank Nitti's got to make sure that, Mr. Rizzo, the butcher, is taken care of. They send Carmine the Butcher Rizzo to sort of spend some time at the dollhouse, the safe house, stay out of the public eye, behave yourself and quit making, we don't want you to, kill any more women here. And now, it might sound a little bit crazy that they're sending this butcher to the dollhouse, but the dollhouse was kind of considered a place where everybody respected. And so, frankly, it appears as if Frank Nitti assumed that the butcher would behave himself. And, well, let's just say that the butcher doesn't exactly do that. And he does something at the dollhouse that upsets Claire greatly, and then he takes off. He leaves the dollhouse after committing this egregious act, and that causes Claire to want some revenge. Now, the problem is that you got these four girls at the dollhouse, and they want to get revenge, or at least 3 out of 4 of them do. And how are they going to do that? They're powerless. They're dames. What could a dame do, right? They're just dames. They got no money. They do what they're told, right? And this is 1933 Chicago. What are 4 dames going to do against the Chicago Mafia, right? What can they possibly do? Well, that's where Alvin Tucker comes in. That's where the Clovers come in. And that's where some other manipulations by Claire come in orchestrating a plan to take revenge on the butcher. And how she does that, and the manner in which all these forces come into play, and the betrayals, and how that all these things come into play, and how all these players that you might know, especially if you enjoy history, if you like 1920s, 1930s history, you're really going to enjoy how all these moving parts come into play. I got to give full credit to the writer Chris Saraceni here. All these, the way he manages to move these plots, all these plots and subplots into play, and the beautiful art of Nick Kalislian. These guys know how to weave a pretty good tale. I nitpicked this as I read it, and I couldn't find any plot holes. I really did, because I was doing this and I thought, well, I want to find a plot. Can I find a plot hole? I couldn't find a plot hole here. Everything fit. And what's beautiful about this is when I got to the end, there's a couple of dangling questions that I had at the end that are perfect mining for future stories in this particular universe, in this Casa Nostra universe. And even the title is absolutely beautiful. The title, Casa Nostra, in Italian means to our home. And so when you actually say the Italian phrase, and I'm not Italian myself, but if you, benvenuto a Casa Nostra in Italian means welcome to our home. And the phrase Casa Nostra has been, apparently it's been bastardized over the decades, and it's a phrase that has been associated with the mafia family, often sometimes meaning in the family way. And it's actually been wrongly associated with as meaning some sort of family or mafia rules. So it's a perfect name for this, because Casa Nostra meaning welcome, basically welcome to our home. And it's this safe house hosted by these four beautiful girls, led by Claire, and welcome to our home. And then of course you have murder and mayhem and betrayal and chaos and gangsters and violence and corrupt cops all rolled into one. And so you have that mafia sort of influence and that gangster influence. So it makes the title to this graphic novel is just perfect. This is ultimately a revenge tale. These are four women that you see somewhat as victims, but clearly aren't victims quite like the gangsters think they are. These are strong, independent women that are really behind the scenes far stronger than the gangsters and the mafia think that they are, and they use that to their advantage. But they're not men. They're not gangsters. They're women, and they have a very different way of doing things. And one of those, one of the women in particular, exercises compassion and thinks compassionately and thinks in terms of forgiveness, and that flies in the face of Claire, who's out for vengeance. And so we have this theme of vengeance versus forgiveness, and how those two things are reconciled in the dollhouse is very interesting, and it really makes for compelling reading, and it also makes for some tragedy, and it makes for some sacrifice at the end. Really sort of hits the reader, and really makes you reevaluate different aspects of the story once you get to the end of it. Now, if I'm going to be nitpicky in terms of the plot, I could say that the ending is somewhat convenient, because it does seem that things wrap up sort of in a nice, neat little ball at the end. However, it's so satisfying how it ends that I didn't care that it was convenient. And in any event, the way it wrapped up, while it was convenient, it wasn't predictable. Because I found myself, even right to the end, I kept asking myself, how are the girls going to get out of this? Because as things continued to go wrong in the story, I thought, oh my God, how are these girls going to get out of this? And so when they do, I found myself challenging myself, asking myself, okay, what did I miss? How are they going to get out of this? How are they going to get out of this? And how do they get out of it? The pieces come together, perhaps somewhat conveniently, but boy, it makes for a satisfying tale. When I finished reading this, I thought to myself, I would love for this comic book, this graphic novel, to be an HBO movie of the week or something. This is good stuff. I would love for this to be a series. I think this is a great concept for a series of graphic novels. I hope they do more. The idea of a safe house on the outskirts of Chicago in 1933, which is right at the end of the Prohibition era, because it was in December of 1933 when the 21st Amendment, I think, revoked the 19th Amendment, and Prohibition was done away with. And just when the Chicago mob was sort of, at their peak, but coming into their own and becoming more powerful, right? I think that just makes for a perfect time period, the stories that they could tell. I think this is an excellent concept for a series. And let's be honest, I collect a lot of comic books a month. I would love to have an ongoing gangster comic book. there just aren't a lot of comic books out there that have a gangster theme. I think that Chris Saraceni here, Saraceni and Nick Kalislian, I think that they should continue to do these types of stories. And wow, the art here. Let's talk about the art. I'm going to show some images here in the art. The art is just fantastic. The way that Nick Kalislian can convey violence without showing an excessive amount of it. What he can show through facial expressions, particularly when he draws pain and suffering on women's faces. When he can make the villainous faces so expressive on the different gangsters and the different members of the mafia. The sexiness of the women. The anger of Claire as she's expressing her frustration to Charlie over the circumstances that occurred at the dollhouse that led to her wanting to seek revenge. The sternness of Frank Nitti, the way he's artistically rendered, in basically running the mob, putting his foot down, insisting things are done a certain way. The subtle use of color. Most of the colors here, it's very muted, but every now and then you'll see Claire in red. And you'll really see, it's interesting that Nick's that when there are some bright colors here, how it really sort of stands out, and it shows the sexiness of the characters, particularly Claire. There are some scenes that are just gorgeous. There's a scene with a pickup truck with moonshine in the back of it. It looks absolutely gorgeous. I'm not even sure if this was painted or what it was. But this is truly gorgeous. What I thought was particularly interesting was the portrayal of the character Alvin Tucker, who doesn't look like a mafioso at all. He wears a cowboy hat. He's African American. He's very interesting. He's very badass. He's very cool, and his character arc in this story is very interesting. I won't spoil it for you, but there are so many wonderful story arcs here, and everyone has a chance to shine. Another high compliment I want to give is every now and then, as you're reading, you'll get an impression how when you watch old movies, you'll see the black and white, the old films from the 1920s and 30s. You can tell when you're seeing old footage from the 1920s and 30s. You get a sense of that feeling with the colors. It's sort of like that sort of muted light brown coloring, or maybe a muted black and white. It's the use of the different colorings when it shows different places, like the Washington Park racetrack. At one point, they'll show the Clovers who are corrupt cops, and you'll just get a sense that you're watching an old film, and it'll reinforce the sense that you're actually living in the time period. And this is a graphic novel, so remember, this isn't a movie. This is actually a comic book that you're reading, and it really pulls you into the story. That's the talent of that's Nick Kalislian's talent, and to pull you into the story with that type of art. This is beautifully illustrated, and the fact that the story is so compelling is a bonus. I got to tell you that this art is good enough that even if there were shortcomings in this story, this was a pleasure just to go through and look at. I'm definitely going to be picking this up in graphic novel form. I've ordered it. I'm going to be picking it up at my comic shop. I've reviewed it online, but it is beautiful. I want to own my own hard copy of this, and I strongly encourage you guys to check it out. It's Casa Nostra. It is a kick-ass gangster tale with all the highlights of the betrayal, the violence, the romance, the anger, the revenge. It's got everything. You'll love it. I had to wear my own sort of fedora here. It's got it at Bailey's. It's pretty cool. And I figure, I don't know if I might do this in black and white. But guys, this is a sheer joy to read. I thank Spike Valentine for making me aware of this. And it was funny because Spike told me, he says, Comic Boom, he says, don't be afraid to be critical. I mean, give an honest opinion. This is me being critical. This is I love this. It's going to have to be another reviewer to find something wrong with this, because I absolutely love this. I wish This was like to me, this was like watching sort of like a female-led cast of The Sopranos in the early 1930s. This is fun. This is really great. This is what graphic novels are supposed to be about. Check out Casa Nostra. This is a graphic novel, HBO style, coming to you from Udon Entertainment Corporation. I'm looking forward to more of their work. I understand this is their first original work. If this is their first original work, wow. Color me impressed. I'm in for the long haul. This is worth checking out, guys. I'm going to leave the links under here for this video to where you can pick up this comic book and order it, even digitally on Comixology. I think it's $14.99. I think it's $25.99 US if you're going to order it at your local comic shop. But talk to your retailer about it, or if you want to get it a little cheaper but have it permanently in your iPhone or your iPad, it's $14.99 American. It's well worth it. Check it out. And well, in the meantime, guys, Comic Boom out.